Hey, welcome to Single Mom Talks with Mary and Bree. We're so excited to be with you today. All right. So, one of the things that we were going to head off with was this idea. And if you see me looking down, I've got notes and stuff that I'm referring to down here. But this concept of developing the skill of how to think versus what to think. One of the most powerful things that I have been taught over the years is that I think about it in context with my kids a lot. I think about it in context of if I'm working outside of the home or if I'm working with people from within the home, because Bree and I both coach. So how that principle of teaching somebody how to use their intuition, how to use their brain, how to use their own connection to God to receive answers for their life and lead themselves, because nobody's coming to save you. Nobody is coming on a white horse to come in and just pluck you out of your problems and rescue you and give you all the answers. God isn't even going to do that, because that doesn't create a strong people. That doesn't create strength within somebody. And I believe that's a big part of why we're here, is to remember who we are, and the strength that we have here is like the strength that we had before we came. And so that's like why agency is so important, right? Like it all just ties back into this concept of, well, what do you think? Like, what do you think? And I found God asking me that question a lot. What do you think? What do you think you should do? And then I feel like sometimes he's actually gone really silent for big periods of time, which was really scary to begin with, until I realized that he's like, no, I trust you. Like, go make decisions, go learn from them, and do better and be better and progress. And because that's how we make whatever it is that we're learning our own, is when we are the ones discovering and failing and falling and standing back up and all of that.
Oof, I love that. And like along the same lines too, like if we don't know how to think, when we fail, if we are in a space of not being able to like think appropriately, we're going to spiral and we're going to stay stuck for a really long time. So that's why it's so important to know how to think, so that when you are in situations where it feels like your world is falling apart or whatever, you can get yourself out and you can lead yourself through the pits of hell and not get stuck there. So one of my favorite tools, especially when it comes to positive thinking, is I teach my clients this all the time. Like I'll have like a bracelet or a hair tie or something. And every time something negative, because here's the thing, most people are not aware of their thoughts. They're just going throughout their day. They don't even realize the thoughts that are going on in their mind. And so if you're not aware of your thoughts, how can you create a different reality? How can you be self-aware enough to know what to shift, what needs to change, and to even lead yourself? So my favorite practice when people are starting to learn this is get a hair tie, bracelet, something. And every time you hear a thought that is not helpful, switch it to the other side of the wrist and choose a different thought consciously. Choose a different thought that resonates for you, that feels better for you to believe. And by doing this, first of all, you are like becoming more aware of your thoughts and realizing, oh my gosh, like I think so much negative, or oh my gosh, like I didn't realize what my thoughts were actually saying. And also it helps you to start shifting the narrative within your head, because our thoughts create our emotions, which creates our habits and behaviors, which creates our results. So if we want different results, we have to start with our thoughts.
Oh, it's so good. And I love the physical action that goes with that of switching it. We're very physical beings. And if we're not in touch with physical movement, if we're not doing those things, then we're missing a huge part of what can help us rewire our brains and rewire our habits. Because, and we actually were talking about this last night on a training that we did together, where action a lot of times is the solution to fear and to doubt, and the solution to moving through those limiting beliefs. So sometimes that something as simple as just moving that from one wrist to the other, your brain just goes, oh, and it just kind of wakes up. And it's funny, every time you bring up that tool, I think snap it. And then I'm like, no, you're not snapping it, because you're not smacking yourself every time you have a negative thought. Like, you don't have to punish yourself. Just move it and become aware. It's so funny that my brain goes there. But like, the more that we get to know ourselves, and I, for a long time, thought, so I started this journey out, 10 years ago. And I used to think that I actually had a really quiet mind back then, but really what it was is I was numb, and I wasn't really aware of the little quiet things or the beliefs. And maybe they weren't even thoughts. Maybe they were just feelings that I was having that I wasn't aware of, and that were showing up and creating results in my life that I didn't understand, because I didn't understand the root. I didn't understand the fruit because I didn't understand the root. So the more you get to know yourself, the more the more you get in touch with your physical body, which that wrist tool is a good place to start. The more control you have over your thoughts and your results. And the more you realize where you go, like, we've been talking a lot about pendulums this week together. And, we have a tendency to, as we're learning things, we go from one end of the pendulum to the other, where on one end there's numb, like I brought up before. And on the other end, we're having a meltdown and we're exploding, and this pit happened, and we don't know how to manage our thoughts and manage our emotions, so that when something hard happens, that we can get through that without sinking to the bottom of the pit every single time. And that's a process. It's a process to learn. It's a language to learn. It's a skill to learn. So if you've gone to college and you're learning something new, you know that it takes a certain amount of time to learn. Or if you're learning a new language, like literally, if all you speak is English and you're learning Spanish, it's a little bit of a process to learn the words and the nuances, and the Spanish that we speak in a class is probably way different than the Spanish they speak actually in a Spanish speaking country. So learning the language of your mind and the language of your emotions is literally like learning Spanish if you don't speak Spanish. And so I think knowing that can give you some permission to fail, and some permission to not get it and be frustrated. And then you don't have to be as frustrated, because you know that it's just a process.
Ooh, yes. And I love that you talked about how it feels kind of like a different language. And I know at the beginning, like, one thing that I realized when I was trying to hear my own thoughts and like really be aware of them was I couldn't even sometimes hear my own thoughts, but yeah, I was able to feel my emotions. So I was like, ooh, I'm really angry right now, or I'm really depressed, or I'm really sad, or I'm really anxious or afraid. And that was a signal to me, because our emotions are just signals. They're just signals. They're not good or bad. They're just signals. And I just was like, okay, what was like, I'm feeling really sad right now. I wonder what the thoughts were that led to this emotion. And that kind of like helped me backtrack to realize, what were the thoughts I was thinking? Oh, I was thinking I'm a terrible mom, this, whatever. And I was like, oh, are those thoughts ultimately true? And I was like, no. Like, and so it's really helpful to also, like, when you're learning this new language of thoughts, to pay attention to your emotions. What are your emotions telling you, right? What is that signal that your body is bringing you like attention to? And backtrack and be like, okay, what were the thoughts I was thinking? Okay, is that ultimately true? What can I choose to believe instead? What feels better for me to believe? And then it helps you to get that back in check.
Yeah. So it's funny because so we all have to start somewhere, right? Like, I was so far on the numb scale that I didn't even recognize emotions. I remember freshly coming out of my divorce and working with like my first coach or something, and realizing that, like, I can't tell the difference between fear and peace, because those are the two big things that people would talk about, right? Like, if you feel peace, it's right. And I'm like, well, what the freak does peace feel like? Like, I don't know. The only thing I could identify was anger. Like, that was the only thing. And so it took me a long time, and it still takes me a long time. Like, sometimes I'll walk around feeling some way in my body, and all of a sudden it'll hit me like, oh, like, this doesn't feel good. Whatever it is that I'm feeling doesn't really feel good. Like, what's going on? And then I'll realize, oh, like, I'm mad about something that happened 4 hours ago, but I am so quick to like move past it and not pay attention to it that I don't even realize it until hours later. So I'm getting quicker at that. But that's just to say, like, we all start somewhere. And some of us are really, really keyed in and intelligent about our emotions. And others of us are not. And some of us are really good about hearing our thoughts. And others of us are not. I was neither. Like, I didn't know what was going on in my brain. I didn't know what was going on with my emotions. Oh, you know what I did know, though? I did feel, I felt a gut feeling, which actually is a human design thing. So that's something if you guys are interested in. It's just like a personality, but it's not really a personality. It's like I don't know what you would call it, but yeah. And so it's just a clue into how you operate as beings. So I would feel in my gut. So I'm a big body learner, and I would feel like, does this feel good? Or no, that doesn't feel good. So maybe so I'm just figuring things out as we're talking, you guys. Like that's where my intelligence was, and where my intuition was really connected into was my body. It wasn't so much my emotions and my thoughts. It was my body gives me signals.
Ooh. Okay, like I just like hearing that and seeing where you are now, I am just blown away. Like the idea that you had no idea your thoughts, your emotions, like Mary is one of the most in tune people I've ever met. And I think it came with that practice piece, right? That piece of like continually going back to what am I feeling? What am I like learning about those things, right? Like tell us a little bit about of your journey and your story and how you learned that, because I think a lot of people don't even realize how freaking numb they are. Like they don't even know like, oh, what are my thoughts? Or, oh, what are emotions? Or, oh, like there's no emotional intelligence at all. Like zip none. And now like I know I didn't know you very much obviously before.
Right.
Like when I met you 3 years ago, like you were already in those beginning stages of learning these things. And like, I just, and like, look at you now. And I know like you'll come into Vox and be like, dude, I'm feeling this way. Or like my body is saying this. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like how amazing is that you went from emotionally completely numb to now you pick up on signals that when your body is saying something to you, you can be like, oh, I know why my leg hurts. It's because of this. And emotionally, this is what this means. You know, like it's so fascinating. Right.
Well, my biggest goal when I was first divorced was I wanted to forgive my ex-husband. Mm-hmm. And I just knew that if I forgave him, then it would all be okay, because there's that adage of forgiveness is for you, not for the other person. Right. And there were some mistakes I made along the way there, but what it did was, and then my other one was to learn to hear the spirit, because I was like, obviously I wasn't paying attention back then. So we're going to do things different going forward. So I threw myself into coaching programs and mentorships and into the scriptures. And back then, so I thought when I got divorced, I was like, hey, this is what you do when you get divorced. You go and you work 12 jobs so that you can make ends meet, and you never see your kids. Like, it was just like the stereotypical thing. But I felt my body was like, no. And I had enough of an awareness at that point, because I'd started working on myself a little bit, I guess that year or so before I actually got divorced. So I had enough awareness at that time where I felt, and I was very trusting at the time. And the feeling was like, no, I need you to stay home and heal, because you're going to need this later. So I was in like this pressure cooker pot of aloneness, because my kids were teeny tiny at the time. And I had all of this time on my hands when, we had, my one is at preschool and the other one is taking a nap, or at night. I did so much scripture study. I took so many courses, classes, anything that came my way that was teaching me about hearing the spirit and developing my spiritual gifts, and would help me heal, energy work, whatever it was, like full-time. That was my full-time job. You hear about people and you've got a couple and the one person is going to school full-time, and that's like their full-time job. That's how they refer to it. That's kind of how I was. So it was like and it has been years of really, really intense study of myself and study of how the spirit works and how your spiritual gifts work combined with that. Yeah. And then just being put in the position where I had to make choices and where I didn't have somebody else to ask. So this is a huge thing that Brie and I just are so big about, that I had to learn to rely on me. I didn't have a spouse to go to and ask questions and bounce things off of. And I didn't really have anybody close to me that I could do that with either, because I was the only one that I knew, like, that I was close with myself, doing that kind of study. So the other people in my life weren't studying those things. They weren't doing, I was meeting people through the classes, but I didn't really have anybody to like bounce ideas off of. So it was a lot of spending time by myself and getting to know myself through those things, and then taking action when I would get inspiration. Like at one point I felt like I started getting this feeling in my body, like I wasn't where I was supposed to be. Like there was something, and something needed to change. And eventually I realized like I needed to sell my house. And I was like, what? Like, where am I going to go? Who am I? Like, what, why would I do that? And the thought just came, well, do you want to stay the same or do you want to grow? And I was like, oh, well, I want to grow. So, so it's, and that's continued on. So just time after time after time of getting this gut feeling that it was time to move on from a certain place or from a certain relationship or certain whatever it is, and following through with that. And that has led me to moving states a couple different times with my kids by myself. It's led to so many different things. So I think it's been a long process of that. But how about you?
Yeah.
How have you developed all this?
Yeah. So like, I feel like mine was very similar in the, like, first of all, I didn't even realize that I was thinking. Does that make sense? Like, I remember my first coach that I hired back in 2015, she was like, let's talk about thoughts. And I'm like, cool. What is that? You know what I mean? And then like when I went to Empire with you and April and like, everyone there, people around me would talk about how like, oh, like if their knee hurt or if something hurt in their body, they paid attention to that because sometimes that meant emotionally something was not right, and like paying attention to that. And my mind was just blown. Like, what? Your body talks to you? Like, you know what I mean? Like that was that next level of like wanting to understand that. And I just was so numb and so like not aware of my emotions, and like I didn't realize the power that I had, like, especially when it comes to creating a different reality for myself, because I was so stuck in this depression loop and anxious loop that like I didn't realize that so much, actually, like a lot of it had to do with my thoughts, which also kept me in a environment that wasn't healthy as well, because my thoughts were consistently saying, I'm the problem, which, okay, like, yes, you can be part of the problem, but also when you're in a toxic environment, like there's more to the story there. But however, there was a lot of like, I'm not enoughness, or I'm ugly, or I'm fat, or I'm like a bad mom, or who am I to want this or desire this? Like, so like complete lack of self-worth and self-love. And I remember being in this space of like starting to recognize my thoughts. And I was like, I am a bully to myself. Like I was so mean to myself. Like the words that came out of my mouth, like if I said that to another human being, they would not want to be around me. Right. Like it was just bad. And I just remember being like, oh my gosh, like if I want to change, if I want my circumstances to be different, I need to start talking nicer to myself. So I remember like going and looking in the mirror and just being like, you're amazing. And I almost like choked on my words because I was like, ugh, that doesn't feel true. That doesn't feel, you know what I mean? But like, I started throughout the day, first of all, catching my thoughts and being like, if they were not nice about myself, I would switch it, right? I'd be like, nope, we're choosing this now. This is what feels better to believe. I am a good mom. I am doing the best that I know how with the skills that I've been given. I am beautiful, exactly as I am right now, as I progress, or you know what I mean? But I remember looking in the mirror and just being like, I'm not available. Like, I can't do this to myself anymore. I need to become a friend to myself. I have to like heal my relationship with myself. And as I started doing that, like healing my relationship with myself, I started realizing how toxic my environment was, but also I started realizing like relationships really started shifting. I no longer wanted to hang around friends or family members or whatever that were treating me less than what I deserved or taught myself, because we hang around people who teach us, who treat us the same way that we treat ourselves. And so as I was healing my self-worth and learning to set boundaries and talking nicer about myself, like I realized I was more in tune with my body. Like before, I wouldn't even notice an ache or a pain because I was so numb. Now, when something is off, I'm like, oh, like I'm feeling a pain in my toe. That's interesting. Like I never noticed that before, because before I was just so numb. And now it's like, oh, what does that mean? You know? So I think it really is just a process of intentionally asking, like talking to yourself. It feels so weird at first to talk to yourself and like whatever, but it's so powerful, especially when you are on your own and you have no one else to like tell you the things that you need to hear. So for instance, the other night, I just sat there and just like literally just hugged myself and just was like, I love you. You're more than enough. And you got this. And I know it's hard right now. Like just telling myself the things I needed to hear. And my system was just like, oh, thank you. I needed that, you know?
Yeah. And talk about that skill. Like we should dive into that skill of showing up for yourself. And it is a skill. You guys, I thought when I was a child, I don't know why, but I thought you were just born with what you had. And if you weren't born with it, you didn't have it. Like if you weren't born with the talent, if you weren't born with the skills, if you weren't born with the faith, if you weren't born with the whatever, then you just didn't have it. And literally just about everything in life is a skill that can be developed. And so it's a skill to learn to show up for yourself. Do you want to talk about that for a minute? Like get into that a little bit?
Yes. So the first thing that I realized, like when things were just really heavy, things were going wrong, like my marriage was falling apart. I had already gotten to this space of I needed to do things for me and no one else. Because here's the thing, I realized this all stems from people pleasing, which is a trauma response. But I just remember like thinking like, oh my gosh, if I act this certain way, maybe my husband will reciprocate or treat me this way or whatever. Or if I act this certain way, then my mom will love me more. Or if I do this certain thing, my friend will show up this way, which is actually kind of manipulation in a sense. But again, it's going back to what the trauma response was, right? Here's the thing. When it comes to people pleasing, and I promise this will all tie back in. When it comes to people pleasing, if we continually put others before ourselves, we will find ourselves dying of thirst because we are so bent on needing external validation for our sense of self-worth, for our sense of like, okay, am I loved? Am I good enough? But here's the thing. What happens when that external validation is not there? You drowned. Like you're done. You are on fire. You cannot survive. And so I started realizing like, I have to give myself this first. I have to treat myself with respect if I want other people to treat me with respect. I have to love myself so deeply that I have boundaries around how I will be treated and how, like, you know what I mean? Even boundaries with my own self. Like, I will not show up this way. Like, this doesn't resonate with me, or this, like, you know what I mean? Like, there just is this stance of when you are starting to learn to love yourself, you show up differently. You treat yourself with so much more respect. You aren't like beating yourself up because you didn't get the dishes done the night before. like you are so much more compassionate and kind with yourself. And what happens is you become a magnet for other people who will also treat you the same and see your value the way that you see yourself.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's so good. Okay. So like so many thoughts. So like if you were the only person on earth, who would you have to rely on? Yourself. That's it. Mm-hmm. If the zombie apocalypse happened and everybody gets wiped out except for you, what do you need to do to survive? And don't go down the rabbit hole of, well, there wouldn't be any point there because you're the only one there. Okay, just stay with me, right? Like, you're the only person. Or that book Hatchet. If you guys have ever read that by Gary Paulson. Um, it's about a boy who he's on a plane to go visit his dad somewhere. And it's just like a little 2-person, like little private plane type thing. And the pilot has a heart attack and dies, and the plane crashes in the middle of nowhere in the mountains of Canada or something like that. And it's the story of him, and it's a fictional story, but it's the story of him having to learn to survive in this wilderness area, and make it out alive. So like, if you put things in that context, like tomorrow is not promised. Everything about your world could change like that. So now is the time to prepare for any possible future. And that doesn't mean that you sit there and you panic. It doesn't mean that you put all of this thought energy towards if bad things happen. But what it does mean is that you handle life better when you are prepared on all the different levels, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And then if you put it in the context of your kids, you can help your kids more if you are prepared. It's the gas mask analogy. It's the plan for peace, prepare for war. It's the better to be a warrior in the garden than a gardener at war. It's all of those things. So, and when you're relying on others and this is a process, because I'm very much a verbal processor. And so it's really helpful for me to have conversations outside of myself. But I've also had to learn how to have a conversation like back and forth with God if I don't have somebody else available to talk to, or sometimes it just needs to be between me and God. So if we're constantly relying on others to validate what we think and know is right, then we don't ever get to that point where we can lead ourselves. So I was actually just listening to a podcast, Ryan Mickler's most recent one, and I don't remember who he's interviewing, but he was a former Navy SEAL, and he's worked with Jocko Willink, and he was in the same unit as Chris Kyle from American Sniper. And he was talking about how Jocko trained him and then how he's training others. And he would have people come to him, and say, hey, what do you think we should do here? And he would throw it back at him and be like, well, what do you think you should do? And the guys would sometimes get, irritated and be like, no, I'm literally coming to you because I don't know what to do. And he was like, well, I'm putting it back on you because I legitimately want to know what you think. Like, what is your idea? And he goes, 9 times out of 10, they would finally come out and tell me their idea of how to handle the situation. And he'd be like, that sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Do it. And so yeah. Like in that military sense too, like if you're going to learn to lead somebody, if you're going to learn to lead your children, then you're going to be put in situations where you are the leader. Imagine that. And you don't have anybody else to ask. And so you need to be able to trust yourself and remember who the freak you are so that you can lead yourself and your family to safety, to thriving, to good things in life, how to teach your children how to navigate this world is so different than what it was 30 years ago when you and I were kids. It's so different. So yeah.
Yes. And I just wanted to end with this, just reiterating what you're saying, how important it is to lead yourself. Lead yourself first. Which means love yourself first, which means set boundaries with yourself first, which means have discipline with yourself first. Because you can't lead your kids if you aren't leading yourself first. That means doing the things that you know need to get done, even when you don't want to do them. It means having that internal stance of, I'm not settling. There's more for me to do here. This struggle may hurt, but I'm not sitting here. I'm not camping out here. And being aware of your thoughts and being willing to hone in on that skill. I see so often people are not okay with being beginners. Mm-hmm. And that's why they never evolve, is because they're so scared of failure that they aren't willing to suck. But here's the thing, the greatest of the greats sucked every single one of us that are good at something, we sucked at first. Yeah. So you're going to suck at recognizing your thoughts at first. You're going to suck at loving yourself at first. You're going to keep going. That's the difference. Like, I wouldn't be where I am today. I know, Mary, you wouldn't be where you are today if you weren't willing to suck at it, to be like, oh, I got to try again tomorrow. Put in those reps. Muscle doesn't build by going to the gym one time. We can't expect a 6-pack or to be, this certain physique if we go one time. Like, no, it is consistency over time that creates results. Keep going.
And don't use your personality as an excuse. I hear so much, and I know we're coming to an end of our thing, but I hear so much. I have ADHD, and so I don't know how to do it, and I can't do it. Or again, the personality things, like, I know you're dying over there. I know. Because we both, like, literally, I had a doctor scan my brain and told me that I had ADHD 8 ways to Sunday. Like, and breathe the same thing. Like, we get it. You just learn to work within that. So, or like these other personality things, like, oh, well, my personality test says this, or my human design says this, and so I can't do this. No. You learn, you do those things so you can learn how you work, so you can work with that, not use that as an excuse to not have an organized or successful life, or to have crappy relationships with your kids because you don't have enough rest time, or whatever it is. Like, use it as a tool. Use your personality. Turn your personality into your Ferrari instead of your little podunk, broken down thing out front that is hindering you, because that's not what it is. It's your superpower. It's who you are. So don't use it as an excuse.
Boom. Amen. It kind of reminds me, like, really fast. It reminds me. So, when I was adopted, I was on so many different medications. Like, they were like, she has anxiety, she has this. And I went into my home with my mom. Now, obviously, like, I know she used inspiration to know what to do with this, but she was like, she didn't tell me that I was diagnosed with ADHD. She didn't tell me that I had all these things. And she just was like, nope. No, like, you are expected to hold this line. You will get A's. You will do this. Like, she never told my teachers, hey, she has ADHD. Like, she has these issues, so, like, you need to coddle her. No, like, my mom was like, sorry. Like, again, it's good to be aware of those things so that you, like, don't get down on yourself if maybe you think differently than others. But to, like Mary was saying, to use it as an excuse, like, you are just hindering yourself. Look at it, be aware of it, and then move forward. Be like, okay, what's the skills I need to do? What do I need to do to make sure that I can get the most out of my life based on the diagnosis that I have, or whatever?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Use it as your superpower. So just really quick, my daughter has a genetic muscular thing. And I raised her. Now she's more aware of it, because now she's old enough that she's starting to recognize the gap between her and some of the other kids physically. Like, Mom, why can I just flat out not keep up with kids my age and things like that? So we've had some more talks about it recently. But when she was little, like, I didn't tell her, I didn't tell her brothers, I didn't raise her with this diagnosis so essentially she has low muscle tone. To simplify it. So I didn't raise her thinking that, no, don't climb on that jungle gym because your muscles aren't strong. And she has just grown leaps and bounds. She can do everything that everybody around her does. Now, she does it a little bit different, and maybe it's a little bit slower, and she may have to work harder to get to do the things that she wants to do. But I didn't raise her with a limited mindset, and boy, is that girl strong. But it also called me out a little bit. Like, when you were talking, I'm like, okay, how can I improve that? Because right now she talks about, like, Mom, I want to go play basketball. And in my mind, I'm like, legit, I don't know. Like, and so if you don't know, if you get to that point where you're like, this is beyond my skill, I don't know how to navigate this, go find somebody who does. Go find somebody to ask and to figure out and to problem solve with, because you're not right now. You are not the only person on earth. The zombie apocalypse has not fully taken over and wiped out civilization yet. So right now you have resources. You have the internet, you have coaching groups, you have people. So just be brave enough to call yourself out too and be like, oh, like I can improve that. Like, how can I make that a little bit better, and don't go to shame about it.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Amen.
All right, love. Anything else?
That's all.
Okay. All right, folks. We will see you next week.
Okay, bye.